Huntsville, Texas, April 23, 2025. In the chilling silence of the Huntsville Unit Prison, the soft but haunting sound of a needle-piercing skin marked the end of Moises Mendoza's life, the killer who once shook Farmersville to its core. At 41 years old, Mendoza faced execution by lethal injection, a common but controversial form of capital punishment in the U.S. Today, we will retrace his final journey, from a last meal that evoked the taste of home to his dying words. What transformed a once promising young man into one of the most violent individuals Collin County had ever seen? The story revolves around a single victim, yet her tragedy was enough to stun the entire Farmersville community. Rachelle O'Neal Tollison, a young mother just 20 years old, born on January 20, 1984, Rachelle was a resilient woman striving to navigate the challenges of divorce while caring for her 6-month-old daughter, Avery. Living alone in a small house in Farmersville, Texas, Rachelle was remembered by family and friends as a devoted mother who poured all her love into her child. Simple moments with Avery, from lullabies to dreams of a stable future, were her greatest joys. But on March 18, 2004, Rachelle's life was brutally extinguished. That morning, her mother came to visit and discovered a horrifying scene. Little Avery left alone and Rachelle gone. The back door of the house stood wide open, as if the intruder had brazenly walked in. In the bedroom, everything was in disarray. The mattress askew, the headboard damaged, furniture scattered, and papers and personal belongings strewn across the floor. This was no mere disappearance. It was the sign of a horrific crime. According to investigative documents, Rachelle was abducted from her home, raped, strangled to death, and her body burned to conceal the evidence. A young mother, with a whole future ahead of her, had her life cruelly snatched away. Who could commit such a heinous act against an innocent woman, and why? Moises Mendoza, born on January 26, 1984 in Mexico, was the perpetrator behind this horrific crime. Growing up in North Texas, Mendoza was once a standout student in high school, where he attended with Rachelle Tollison. In his early years, he was described as hardworking, intelligent, even earning scholarships for his academic achievements. After graduation, Mendoza completed 9 months of training in heating and air conditioning technology, seemingly building a stable future. But behind that promising facade were signs of instability. Acquaintances recalled that Mendoza began exhibiting violent behavior at a young age. One unforgettable incident involved him attacking his mother and sister in their front yard, violently holding them down. This act not only showed impulsiveness, but also indicated a worsening, unstable psyche. By 2003, Mendoza had fallen into a life of crime. He was arrested in connection with 2 armed robberies at the Dallas College Richland campus. When Rachelle disappeared, Mendoza was out on bail awaiting trial for one of these charges. Just days before the crime, he had even attended a small party with about 15 people at Rachelle's home. A chilling detail when considering the proximity between the perpetrator and victim before the tragedy. What pushed a once promising individual like Mendoza down a path of such criminality? Were his prior violent acts ignored warnings, or was there something deeper in his psychology that led to this horrific crime? On the night of March 18, 2004, in the peaceful town of Farmersville, Texas, a horrific crime shattered the tranquility of this small community. According to court documents, Mendoza broke into Rachelle Tolson's home through an unlocked back door. While little Avery slept, Mendoza approached the victim. Prosecutors argued that he abducted Rachelle from her home, exploiting their high school acquaintance to gain access without suspicion. However, Mendoza claimed they both left the house together to buy cigarettes, leaving Avery alone. According to this testimony, things went awry while they were driving. Mendoza suddenly became violent, strangling Rachelle until she lost consciousness. This act was not the result of an immediate argument, but rather seemed to be part of his cruel plan. After rendering Rachelle unconscious, Mendoza took her to a secluded area near his home in Farmersville. In the darkness of the desolate field, he raped Rachelle, then continued his brutal act by strangling her to death, even stabbing her in the throat to ensure she had no chance of survival. The brutality of this crime sent shivers down the spines of even seasoned investigators. After killing Rachelle, Mendoza did not immediately dispose of the body. He left the victim's remains in the field for several days, as if contemplating his next move. Finally, Mendoza returned to the scene, wrapped the body in a tarp, took it to his cousin's property in Farmersville, burned it to destroy evidence, and then threw the remains into a nearby creek. This act not only demonstrated cruelty, but also Mendoza's cold-bloodedness in his attempt to conceal the crime. What compelled him to carry out such a heinous series of actions? Was this an outburst of an unstable mind or a meticulously planned scheme? Rachel Tolson's disappearance was discovered on the morning of March 18, 2004, when her mother visited and noticed something amiss. Little Avery was left alone, and Rachel was gone. The scene, the open back door, the chaotic bedroom immediately prompted the family to call the police. A large-scale search was launched in Farmersville, involving local police and specialized investigative teams. 5 days later, on March 23, 2004, a horrifying discovery shattered the Rachel family's hopes. Her burned body was found in a creek in Farmersville. Thanks to dental records, investigators identified the victim as Rachel Tolson. Forensic evidence, including burn marks and the condition of the body, indicated this was a murder committed with cruelty and intent. Just 1 day later, on March 24, 2004, Moises Mendoza was arrested. The impetus for the arrest came from a surprising detail. Mendoza confessed to a friend that he had killed Rachel. This confession, along with forensic evidence and traces at the scene, quickly linked Mendoza to the crime. Investigators also discovered he had been at Rachel's home a few days before the incident at a small party. This acquaintance led police to believe Mendoza had exploited Rachel's trust to approach her. The investigation demonstrated close cooperation among local police, forensic experts, and prosecutors in Collin County. But did Mendoza ever think he could escape justice forever? Or was he overconfident in his ability to conceal his crime? The trial of Moises Mendoza took place in 2005 in Collin County, Texas. He was prosecuted for capital murder related to the theft, kidnapping, and rape of Rachel Tolson. The trial garnered significant attention from the Farmersville community, where the case had left deep wounds. Prosecutor Greg Davis presented a clear picture of Mendoza's brutality, highlighting his history of violence, including attacks on his mother and sister, as well as a previous rape of a 14-year-old girl. Witnesses, including neighbors and acquaintances, provided testimony about Mendoza's unstable behavior, reinforcing the argument that he was a danger to society. Forensic evidence, including traces at the scene and the victim's body, was presented in detail to prove the savagery of the crime. The defense, in an attempt to mitigate the punishment, presented the opinion of psychologist Mark Vigan. Vigan described Mendoza as emotionally immature and showing signs of unstable psychological development. He argued that Mendoza often reacted angrily when criticized and found pleasure in deceiving others. However, these arguments failed to sway the jury, who were shocked by the level of cruelty of the crime. On June 29, 2005, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. The presiding judge concurred, sentencing Mendoza to death. Prosecutor Greg Davis called him one of the most violent and brutal individuals he had ever encountered in his career. Rachel's family, while feeling a measure of justice had been served, could not erase the pain of their loss. Did this death sentence truly bring closure, or was it merely a concluding chapter in a tragedy? On April 23, 2025, at the Huntsville Unit Prison in Huntsville, Texas, Moises Mendoza, 41, walked into the execution chamber to face his fate. The execution by lethal injection, a common method in Texas, took place in a tense and silent atmosphere. According to unofficial sources, before his departure, Mendoza chose a last meal rich in the flavors of his Mexican homeland as a way to connect with his roots. A plate of tacos al pastor with fragrant roasted pork, pineapple and onions, a steaming bowl of sopa de fideo, the noodle soup his mother used to make, and a sweet horchata to soothe the bitterness of his final moments. Lying on the gurney, Mendoza offered an apology to his daughter and Rachel Tolson's family. In a statement released afterward, he expressed remorse for taking a mother and loved one, admitting that nothing could compensate for his actions. Mendoza also sent words of love in Spanish to his wife, sister, and 2 close friends, saying, "I love you, I'm always with you, I'm fine and at peace." 19 minutes after the lethal dose was administered, Mendoza was pronounced dead, closing one of the most shocking cases in Farmersville. Witnesses, including representatives of Rochelle's family and officials, quietly observed the execution. There were no shouts or resistance, only a heavy silence pervading the room. Pam O'Neill, the victim's mother, witnessed the execution and later shared with the press, "He was on death row for 20 years. Today is the end. He died without pain. I wish I could say the same about my daughter's death." The case of Moises Sandoval Mendoza is not just a story of a brutal crime, but also a reminder of the deep wounds that violence leaves on families, communities, and society. Rachelle Tolson, a young mother with a whole future ahead of her, had her life stolen, leaving her daughter Avery orphaned and a family shattered. Rachelle's father, Mark O'Neill, though he did not forgive Mendoza, expressed sympathy for the killer's mother and sisters, who also suffered the pain of losing a loved one. But he affirmed that Mendoza had disregarded Rochelle's pleas and deserved to pay the price long ago. Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis, in a statement after the execution, emphasized that Rochelle's death had shocked the entire community and left indelible pain. He asserted that the death penalty was a way to honor Rochelle's life, hoping her family found some comfort. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton also expressed support, pledging to continue upholding the law and holding criminals accountable. This case raises profound questions about justice and society. What transformed Moises Mendoza, a young man who once had good academic achievements and opportunities ahead, into an uncompromising killer? What can society do to identify and prevent early signs of instability? And more importantly, does the death penalty, with its perceived necessary brutality for punishment, truly bring justice? Or is it merely a way to respond to violence with violence? Rochelle and Mendoza's story has been reenacted in shows like Forensic Files in 2006 and Solved in 2008 as a reminder of the cost of crime and the fragility of life. This case is not just a personal tragedy, but also a warning about the importance of building a safer society where people like Rochelle can live without fear. What do you think about Moises Mendoza's fate, and what lessons does this story leave us with today? Jamila Hodge, CEO of Equal Justice USA, shared with Newsweek, Equal Justice USA is firmly opposed to the death penalty. The death penalty is not justice. It doesn't heal families. It doesn't deter crime. It deepens suffering, wastes public resources, and maintains a racist system that harshly punishes the poor and marginalized. Worse, the death penalty carries the greatest risk, the possibility of killing an innocent person. Since 1973, at least 200 innocent people have been exonerated after being wrongly convicted. She added, "Look at the states that have abolished the death penalty or don't use it. They have lower murder rates, lower violence rates, because they don't waste resources on the most extreme punishment, but instead invest in community-based public safety solutions. It's time to abolish the death penalty in the United States." So what do you think? Should the death penalty be abolished?